Support Paws and Support Gear by Sunset Cougar. Now, before we begin today, I would like to let you know there are some trigger warnings for this episode. So if any of you are triggered by mentions of suicide, hospitals, self-harm, mental health issues, or talk of depression, please feel free to skip this video and or have someone nearby to talk about these issues with. Having said that, I hope you all enjoy, and let's get to the video. Chapter 1, New Dreams. Midoriya Izuku was only 13 years old, and he wanted to die. He sat on an empty rooftop, knees pulled up to his chest and head buried, his shoulders shaking as he cried. He was so tired. He had just met his idol, All Might, and asked him if he could be a hero without a quirk. All Might had said no. Izuku wiped his eyes. Normally they were filled with light and joy, but now they were dull and empty. His dream was gone, shattered to pieces and whisked away like leaves on the wind. You want to be a hero so bad? I've got a time-saving idea for you. If you think you'll have a quirk in your next life, go take a swan dive off the roof. At that moment, the words of his bully seemed all too appealing. Izuku stood and took off his shoes before climbing over the railing. He didn't even bother to write a note. What was the point? The only one who would miss him was his mom, and once he was gone, she could move on. Maybe his dad would come back and they would have another kid, one with a quirk who would actually be someone worth loving. Izuku looked out over the city. He knew no one would care about his death. His name would simply be added to the long list of quirkless people who had committed suicide. He took a deep breath, wishing just a bit of more air, and jumped. As cliche as it was, Izuku woke to beeping. His head felt foggy and his thoughts were muddled, not letting him fully focus on anything. His whole body felt heavy and odd. He slowly peeled open his eyes and winced at the light. He was in a hospital room. Why was he here exactly? You're awake! A cheerful voice said from beside him. He tried to turn his head, but when that didn't work, he just moved his eyes. Standing next to his bed was a young man with dark brown hair and pink eyes. Izuku tried to say something, but his tongue felt heavy and wouldn't cooperate. The nurse smiled. You're on a lot of drugs. I'll get you some water, the nurse said, leaving quickly to run the errand. Izuku's eyes trailed around the room. Several monitors were beside his bed, showing his vitals. He had an IV in one arm, the tube going under a thick cast. His other arm also had a cast, and there was a brace around his head, neck, torso, which kept him from moving, along with casts on both of his legs. The nurse came back in with a cup holding water and a straw. He put the end of the straw in Izuku's mouth. Small sips, he advised. You've been unconscious for 3 days, and your stomach won't be able to handle much. Izuku remembered what had happened now. He had tried to kill himself by jumping off a roof. God, he was so useless he couldn't even kill himself properly. His eyes burned like he was going to cry, but no tears were shed. Then his eyelids grew heavy, the cocktail of drugs in his system pulling him back into sleep. The next time he woke up, 2 days later, Izuku was a lot more lucid. The nurse introduced himself as Maruyama Giichi and said he would be the one taking care of Izuku during the day. Mariyama explained the casts were due to Izuku having broken a lot of bones, and that the braces on his head, neck, and torso were to keep his spine from getting more damage than it already was. Izuku's mom came in a couple hours later. Inko sobbed and apologized over and over. She blamed herself for not seeing how much pain he was in until he tried to commit suicide. He just lay there and didn't say anything. A week later, Izuku's doctor, a woman named Maeda Chouku, had healed him enough that she could remove his braces and casts. His limbs were sore and stiff after being immobile for so long, so it was a relief to finally have them all off. Dr. Maeda said they needed to run a few tests now that he was out of the casts and braces, which would help determine his prognosis. Izuku felt like static was filling his ears and mind when he heard the diagnosis. He was partially paralyzed from the waist down, and there was nothing they could do. He would never again be able to walk without help, and his balance was akin to a newborn giraffe, so things as simple as bending over to pick something up would be much, much harder, if not altogether impossible. Izuku's eyes burned as he fought back sobs. Now he'd really lost his chance of being a hero. Quirkless and paralyzed, and diagnosed with severe anxiety, suicidal depression, and PTSD to boot. The universe really loved to screw him over, didn't it? Over the next 2 weeks, Izuku learned how to walk with crutches. It was frustrating and painful, and multiple times he just sat down and tried to stop himself from crying. He didn't always succeed. Every part of his body hurt, and all the doctors could do about it was give him pain medication. All quirks had limits after all. And when the paramedics had arrived after he jumped, he'd almost been dead. So even with healing quirks, they had to sacrifice healing the nerve damage to save his life. The result was living in a state of constant pain the meds helped with, but only so much. Izuku cried a lot when he wasn't feeling numb and detached from his body. The world had always been against him, and he always knew he was probably going to die before he was 16. But now the odds had been stacked even higher against him. He doubted now that he would live to 14, let alone 16. When he was finally discharged, he was put on suicide watch in case he tried something again. He spent the drive from the hospital to his apartment staring out the window. He wondered how much worse the bullying was going to be now, and dreaded going back to school so deeply he felt physically ill. When they got to their building, his mom had to help him up the 3 flights of stairs to their apartment because the elevator was out of order. Izuku didn't remember a time when it did work. Once in the apartment, Izuku made a beeline for his room. He spent the next few hours watching hero fights on the computer, but he didn't bother taking notes. What was the point anymore? He really only wanted to watch videos to keep himself occupied. What else was he supposed to do? During dinner, Inko told him that she was going to temporarily pull him out of school and have them send his work electronically. He was beyond relieved. He knew the bullying would come eventually, but he wanted to delay the inevitable as long as possible. A couple of days later, Izuku heard his mom crying because she couldn't find a therapist that would take a quirkless patient. That night, he barely slept as his mind whispered about the 1,000 different ways he could die. Jump off a roof again, maybe higher this time? What were the chances he would survive twice? Slit his wrists while his mom was at work? Overdose on his meds? Jump in front of a train? Hang himself? Drown himself? The options were endless. Soon, though, Izuku made the decision to keep living, at least for the moment. He didn't want to hurt his mom more, not when she was trying so hard to help him. With that decision made, his numbness started turning to boredom, and he grew increasingly restless. It got to the point that while his mom was at work, he disassembled the hairdryer and put it back together again. It was actually pretty fun, and he kept his swirling thoughts together for a little while as he focused. He then proceeded to do the same to the microwave and TV. His mom came back when he was halfway through putting the latter back together and proceeded to freak out. He quickly assured her he knew what he was doing. He didn't. He watched 2 YouTube tutorials. Inko seemed skeptical, but she didn't know how to repair a TV, so she let him continue. When he was done, it worked almost perfectly. He felt a swell of pride. It felt good to have done something right for once, even if now the volume had a habit of getting louder for no reason.
Izuku, can I come in, please?
Inko called as she knocked on his bedroom door.
Yeah,
Izuku replied, looking up from his computer, which was playing a video about a guy who made a rocket-powered hero doll, which had exploded and started a small fire. Inko was smiling widely as she sat on his bed next to him.
I was thinking maybe we should get you a service dog, she said.
Izuku blinked in surprise.
A service dog? But aren't they really expensive?
Inko smiled wider.
I found a non-profit organization that trains service dogs for minors with disabilities. They don't require people to pay for the dogs, and only ask that you donate if you can, since that's what keeps them running. Everyone who's gotten a dog from them gives really good reviews, and says that they changed their lives. I looked into it, and you would be eligible for a dog to help you walk and to help you with your mental health.
Izuku was too shocked to say anything for a long moment. He had known dogs were trained for that sort of thing, but never considered he might get one. Finally, he snapped out of his shock and grinned widely.
I would love one!
Inko smiled back.
I'll put in an application. There's a waiting list, so it might be a while. I'm willing to wait as long as it takes.
And he was willing to wait, though he didn't think he deserved it. He didn't deserve happiness after all he had put his mother through. He was just a worthless Deku who would be better off dead. That night, Izuku stared at himself in the bathroom mirror. He was clutching the blade from his mother's razor, fighting with himself internally. He shouldn't cut himself. It would just cause him more pain, one said. But it would be pain he could control. Pain he chose and wasn't forced on him, the other side argued. The control sounded so appealing. He'd never really had any control over what happened to him, especially around his classmates. They decided what happened, how much pain he would be in, and he could only run and hope they didn't catch him. He knew hurting himself would cause his mother more pain, but she didn't have to know. She never had to know. He knew how to hide injuries. Izuku raised the blade and pressed it into his left forearm, easily cutting a thin line. The pain wasn't as bad as he thought it would be, and nowhere near as much as Bakugo's explosions hurt. He made another cut right above the first. It wasn't long before his arm was dripping with blood. His hand trembled as he dropped the blade into the sink, feeling lightheaded. He stared down at his blood-soaked arm and then looked up at his reflection in the mirror. He was pale and bloody and looked like a ghost. His knees gave out and he sat on the floor, tears dripping down his cheeks. He had done this to himself. Izuku curled in on himself, arm clutched to his chest, and started crying. He didn't hear the door open, so he jumped in surprise when his mom hugged him, not caring that blood was getting on her pajamas. Izuku pressed his face into her shoulder and cried harder as Inko reached into the cabinet under the sink and pulled out the first aid kit, whispering reassurances that she wasn't mad and he would be okay all the while. A week later, his mom finally found him a therapist to talk to over video chat once a week. It was nice to have someone listen and help him, and not say he was a liar when he told her about what happened to him. He never said any names. It wasn't like anything would happen to punish those who hurt him if he did. So he just didn't bother. Chapter 2. Hatsume. Excuse me. Now, there are a couple of trigger warnings for this episode as well. For this chapter, excuse me. And those are depression, self-worth issues, mental issues, and hospitals. If any of these are triggering, please do whatever is necessary to take care of yourself. Izuku took a deep breath to steady his nerves as he followed his mom into the large building. She had noticed his recent interest in engineering and programming and wanted him to be more social, so she signed him up for a social group revolving around those topics. It was for 11 to 14-year-olds and met every Saturday. They quickly found the small conference room where the meetup was held. The large door had a bright pink sign on it which read, Engineering and Programming Club, in black marker. The area around the words was covered in stickers of robots and gears. Inko opened the door and there he entered. There were 2 long tables in the center of the room. Several plastic bins full of various bits of metal and wires were strewn across them. There were 4 other kids in the room, who all turned to look at Izuku and Inko when the door opened. Izuku shrunk under their gazes, knowing they were judging him. Inko hugged him.
I'll come get you at 3. Have fun.
With that, she left, leaving Izuku alone. He slowly made his way to one of the tables where he sat down.
Hi.
A girl with bright pink hair and dreadlocks greeted, leaning over the table towards him. Her greenish yellow eyes had crosshairs in them. Izuku wondered what her quirk was. Maybe it had something to do with targeting or aim.
I'm Hatsume. Why do you need crutches? Did you break your legs or something? Why don't you have a cast?
Izuku shrunk back, wringing his fingers together nervously. She was so energetic.
I'm partially paralyzed from the waist down. I need them to walk.
Izuku expected teasing. He expected pity. He expected disgust. What he did not expect was for the girl to say,
Okay, so what did you know about engineering?
Izuku blinked at her.
Not very much. I just got into it.
Hatsume smiled wider and leaned across the table towards him.
I've wanted to be a support hero since I knew what that was. Normally I'm in my workshop, but my parents decided I needed to socialize.
She punctuated the word with the annoyed eye roll. Her bright, outgoing personality was such a sharp contrast to Izuku's quiet, nervous demeanor that the two hit it off immediately. Hatsume was more than happy to just show him what she knew, and he was happy to listen to her rambling about her babies. She easily filled that what otherwise would have been awkward silence with cheerful noise, letting Izuku speak only when he wanted to. Before he knew it, the group was over, and Inko arrived to pick him up. He and Hatsume exchanged numbers with the promise to keep in touch. As he followed his mom to the car, Izuku wondered if this was what it was like to have a friend. Izuku's chest felt tight as he stared down at the sheets of his bed. Mei didn't know he was quirkless. Once she found out, he knew she would turn on him just like everyone else, and he would lose his only friend. His hands trembled, and he started scratching at his arms unconsciously. He barely noticed the sting as he spiraled further, his nails dug deeper, drawing blood. He didn't notice the door open or the voice of Inko until she was right in front of him, walking him through his breathing exercises and helping him down from his panic attack.
What if Hatsume hates me because I'm quirkless?
Izuku hiccuped, tears spilling down his cheeks. Inko wiped them away and smiled.
Then she doesn't deserve to be your friend. I know it's not easy, but one day you'll find yourself some true friends. The kind that will stick with you through anything.
When Saturday finally rolled around, Izuku felt like he was going to throw up from nerves. Inko dropped him off at the building, trusting he knew where to go. Hatsume was already there when he got to the conference room. She had a large, dark green rucksack with her, which was filled to the brim with bits of metal and wire. She grinned as he sat down. I visited Togglebell Beach the other day. I got a bunch of parts for our babies. Izuku blushed at the statement. He wasn't sure he'd ever get used to her habit of calling their machines babies.
Togglebell Beach? The dumping ground?
Izuku asked. Hatsume nodded.
Yeah. People leave all kinds of electronics I can salvage. You should come with me next time I go.
Izuku rubbed the back of his head.
I can't really help you carry anything.
I probably won't even be able to go onto the beach since the ground is so uneven. Hatsume waved his worries off.
That's fine. You can sit at the entrance and help me salvage parts from the things I need.
Izuku bit his lip and, steeling himself, said, I'm sure you don't want to be seen in public with the quirkless kid. Izuku braced himself for teasing, disgust, everything he was used to, but Hatsume only stared at him and tilted her head.
Why would I care if you're quirkless?
Izuku blinked in surprise.
Well, everyone always says that being quirkless is a curse. If you hang around me, people will start hating you too.
Hatsume burst into laughter.
You think I'm going to leave you just because you're quirkless? You're one of the only people who can actually keep up with me. Besides, most people avoid me anyways. They think I'm weird. You're my friend, and us outcasts have to look out for each other.
Izuku felt happy tears welling in his eyes. Hatsume didn't care that he was quirkless. It felt like a miracle. Hatsume looked very alarmed.
You're crying. Dang it, I'm not good with emotions. Stop crying, please? I'm sorry if I upset you.
Izuku laughed wetly and wiped his eyes.
You didn't upset me. It's just that I've never had a real friend before.
He didn't count Bakugo anymore. Not after everything that had happened.
Well, neither have I. So we must figure out friendship together.
Hatsume declared proudly.
My parents were thrilled when I told them I made a friend. So was my mom. So, want to help me with my sock cannon? Of course.
But what's the point exactly?
Well, if you were a villain, would you want to be hit with a ball of smelly socks?
No.
There's your answer.
The week after that, Izuku didn't go to the club. Why? Because he was in the hospital again. It didn't have anything to do with his legs, but rather with the fact that he had attempted suicide by slitting his wrists. His mom had been distraught when she had found him passed out on his bedroom floor, blood soaking the carpet. Izuku yelped in surprise as the door to his hospital room burst open, revealing Hatsume in all her grease-stained glory. She was carrying a bulging backpack.
What are you doing here? Izuku asked as Hatsume dropped the backpack beside his bed with a loud thunk. Hatsume grinned. You told me you were in the hospital, so I decided to visit you. I can't have you forgetting anything I've taught you, now can I? Izuku smiled. I guess not. Thank you. This means a lot to me, that you took the time to come see me. Hatsume grinned widely. It's what friends do. Now we should hurry before a nurse comes in. I only got my stuff past the metal detectors because I left it on the fire escape and got it when I got past them. Hatsume, that's not allowed. So? If they don't want me making things in the hospital, they need to upgrade their security. Did I tell you about the time I broke my leg and got so bored I tried to combine the button that alerts the nurses and the TV remote and accidentally triggered all of the nurse alert things in the hospital at once? You what? How are you not in prison by now? I honestly have no idea. The two turned towards the door when it opened to reveal Inko. She blinked in surprise to see Hatsume there. Oh, hello. Who are you? She asked her curiously. I'm Hatsume Mei. Midori and I met at the robotics club. Hatsume greeted cheerfully. Inko smiled. Just call me Inko. It'll get confusing if you call us both Midoriya. It's lovely to meet you. Izuku has told me so many wonderful things. Hatsume grinned. You two can just call me Mei then. It's nice to meet you too. She wiped her hands off of her overalls and held it out. It still had a bit of grease on it. Inko shook it and then retreated to wash her hand. Meanwhile, Izuku was grinning from ear to ear. If I get to call you Mei, call me Izuku, he said. Alright, Izuku. Mei agreed. Izuku's room was empty. He had sold all of his hero merch after the incident with All Might, leaving the walls and shelves pretty much bare. As it turned out, a lot of his merch could be sold for quite a lot, and so he had plenty of money to redecorate his room. Inko had actually suggested it, saying it might help to change his surroundings a bit. It'll be like you're closing the old chapter in your life and opening a new one, she had said. He had told her about what All Might had said, and she was furious. But much to her displeasure, there wasn't anything she could do about it besides help Izuku. So she focused on him, and Izuku couldn't be more grateful for all that effort she was putting in for him. So which of these do you like best? Inko asked, holding a handful of green paint chips. Izuku raised an eyebrow. Mom, these are all the same. No, they're not. Yes, they are. No, they're not. There's a clear difference between this one and this one, see? They're the same color. When they were done painting and decorating Izuku's room, had forest green walls and a fluffy Balak rug on the floor. There were containers of salvaged scrap from Dagobah Beach stacked in one corner. His hero-themed bed set had been replaced by a dark green and gold one. The shelves that used to hold hero figures now held half-finished gadgets, blueprints finished and in progress. Reach placed the posters on the wall. All in all, the room was much more him now. Above his bed was a tack board filled with pictures of him, Mei, and his mom, and notes and ideas on bits of scrap paper. Every time he saw it, he smiled. It reminded him that things were getting better. He still had rough patches, days where he thought the world would be better off without him. But seeing Mei's blinding smile or his mom's kind eyes in the photos reminded him that people loved him, that he had worth. It lifted his spirits so much more than the All Might posters ever had. The embers of a new dream had started burning in his soul, and soon they would grow into a roaring fire that couldn't be put out. Chapter 3. A dog and a cat enter the chat.
There are a couple of trigger warnings for this chapter as well. Threats and weapons are added. Group therapy. Inko had signed Izuku up for group therapy. He wasn't looking forward to it, to say the least. She thought maybe he would make another friend. Ha! That was unlikely at best, considering it was quirkless and disabled. He wasn't sure whether this new bitterness came from, but it was probably from the fact that he was done giving a fuck about anyone but May and his mom. No one else deserved it. His therapist was kind of on the edge. He still wasn't entirely sure she wasn't in it just for the money. Izuku fiddled with a bit of dull wire in his pocket as he glared out at the group of teens from the depths of his black hoodie. One of them had tried to talk to him, but he just glared at her until she left him alone. The room was large, with a round table in the center, which everyone was seated around. A small open cabinet sat in each corner of the room. Most of the shelves had either scented candles or piles of leaves on them. The walls were decorated with abstract art, and the table had a lot of scented candles on it. Flute music, that was probably supposed to be relaxing but was honestly just annoying, played softly from speakers on two of the cabinets. The therapist was a middle-aged woman named Jinja Ine, with an empathy quirk she used to help with her sessions. She had told them all when she entered the room. She told them all to introduce themselves. Izuku mostly zoned out until Jinja reached him. He sighed and said, "I'm Midoriya Izuku, and I'm suicidal. I'm quirkless and partially paralyzed, but if I hear anyone say anything about it, I will tase you. My friend and I have been working on making a taser strong enough to knock out All Might, and I bet she'd love to hear what it could do to shrimps like you." What could he say? May's confidence had been rubbing off on him. She really didn't care what anybody thought, and when he asked her how she did it, she said, I don't want to waste my precious time on what some butts think. It's my life, and I can do what I want with it." "It's nice to meet you, Midoriya," Jinja said. "I will ask you to please refrain from threatening others. This is supposed to be a positive place for everyone to heal." Izuku wasn't sure what to think of her. She seemed like someone who smoked a lot of weed. Maybe that was the purpose of all the candles, to drown out the smell of the drug. He rolled his eyes. Fine. The kid next to him snorted in amusement. He had fluffy purple hair, purple eyes with white pupils, and was wearing a black hoodie with a white scarf and yellow goggle design near the neck. Izuku didn't know they made Eraserhead merch. "I like you, Midoriya. I'm Shinso Hitoshi, also suicidal. Can I touch your hair?" Shinso blinked at Izuku. "What?" "Your hair. Can I touch it? It looks soft." "Okay." Izuku reached over and patted Shinso's hair, grinning. "It's so fluffy, like a cat." "I'm glad to see you two are getting along," Jinja said with a smile. "Shinso, could you please tell us your quirk?" Shinso hesitated for a moment before saying, "Brainwashing." Immediately, the entire class's gazes turned wary. Shinso curled in on himself a bit, eyes downcast. Izuku recognized that look. It was the face of someone who was used to hate and discrimination for something they couldn't help, and was so tired of it. Izuku saw that expression every time he looked in the mirror. Izuku reached into his pocket and pulled out his taser. He buzzed it threateningly before holding it out to Shinso. "Want it? I have like 6 more at home." Shinso grinned in a way that made him look mildly insane as he took the taser. "Thanks. My parents are gonna be pissed." "My mom will be pissed if she finds out I'm giving random people tasers. Please don't tell her." "I won't."
As glad as I am that you boys are getting along, please save trading weapons until after class, Jean just said calmly.
Shinso and Izuku rolled their eyes in unison, but stopped talking so the next person could introduce themselves. After class, the two of them traded numbers, and Izuku grinned widely at Shinso.
I'm not easily this confident, but I haven't slept in 48 hours. I chugged a pot of espresso 10 minutes before coming here, and I'm ready to fight a god or become him.
Shinso burst into laughter. I like you. I like you a lot. So, this next section is a group chat, so I'll be saying their tag names before each part. Midoriya Izuku has added Hatsume Mei and Shinso Itoshi to Trouble Trio. Midoriya Izuku has changed their name to Undressed and Depressed. Shinso Itoshi has changed their name to Cats for Days. Hatsume Mei has changed their name to Pink Drink. Actually, since I have voices for each of them, I'm going to try and just do the voices, and if you guys think that's something I should change next time, let me know. Don't worry, I'm wearing clothes. This is just the only thing I could think of that rhymed with depressed. I'm not going to question it. At Pink Drink, are you the crazy lady Midoriya told me about? Shinso, that's rude. I'm a rude person.
Yes, I am. My name is Hatsume Mei.
Shinso Hitoshi.
You both already know who I am. So Shinso, how did your parents react to the taser?
My dad confiscated it. I'm not sure where he hid it.
Want another?
Please. On a totally unrelated note, I was suspended for 3 days for threatening my classmate.
Were they being mean?
Yeah. They said my quirk was villainous.
You've done well, and your quirk is amazing. I will fight whoever says it's not.
Is this friendship?
Yes. Get used to it, because you're not getting rid of us now. So, Shinso, I was wondering where you got that eraser hoodie you were wearing when we met. I didn't think they sold merch for him.
It's custom made. My papa got it for me for my birthday.
Do you have two dads? You mentioned a dad and a papa.
Yeah. Is that a problem?
Of course not. I'm Arrow Ace. I'm by myself.
Okay. And you're not alone, Midoriya.
Middle did a pun.
It ended up taking 7 months after Inko initially put in the application for Izuku to reach the top of the waiting list, and the entire time, Izuku's anticipation only grew. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he and his mom were getting into the car to go to the Helping Paws Service Dog Center. Once they got there, they were met by a woman with bushy red hair and freckles like constellations on every inch of exposed skin. She had a pair of red dog ears in place of human ones, and a fluffy red dog tail. Her legs were digitigrade, pawed, and covered in red fur. She introduced herself as Doyle Madad. She said she would be the trainer to work with them as they found a good dog, and Izuku trained with said dog. Doyle was cheerful and respectful and was willing to go into more in-depth explanations when they asked. Izuku liked her. Izuku was practically vibrating in excitement as Doyle went to get the first dog. He would be meeting a few and saying what he liked and didn't like about them. Using that information, Doyle would be able to find a good match for him. The first dog was a large, dark gray dog that looked sort of like an Irish wolfhound. He had light brown eyes and wiry fur. Doyle introduced him as Cliff. Izuku smiled as he rubbed behind Cliff's ears. Cliff rested his head on Izuku's knees and wagged his tail happily. I think I'd prefer a bit more fluff, Izuku said. Normally he wasn't very picky about anything, but the dog he got would be his constant companion for years. They had to be the best fit possible. Doyle nodded. The next dog was a girl named Robin. She had brown fur with large black patches and chocolate brown eyes. She was so fluffy Izuku swore he could bury half his arm in her fur before he reached her skin. She was much more energetic. She licked his hands and her tail was like a mini helicopter blade. I really like her fur, Izuku said, but she has a bit too much energy. I don't think I would be able to get a dog like her enough exercise. I need one that's willing to pretty much do whatever I'm doing and doesn't mind not going out a lot. Got it, Doyle nodded. Izuku met 2 more dogs, Doyle taking notes the whole time. Izuku went home that night grinning wildly. While he couldn't sleep, he took apart his phone. It was 3 weeks after that Inko told him that Doyle believed she had found the perfect dog. The entire car ride, Izuku was bouncing with excitement. Once they arrived, Doyle led them to a small room and left to go get the dog. A couple of minutes later, she returned with a large mutt. Her fur was fluffy and a beautiful mix of golden brown and black with a white patch on her chest. She had chocolate brown eyes and floppy ears. Izuku grinned as he stroked her fur. She was calm, friendly, and the sweetest thing he had ever met. What's her name? Izuku asked. Her name is Clover. Izuku nodded. Clover. It suits her. Doyle told them everything Clover would do for him once they were done with training. She would help him walk and balance, pick things up, calm him down when his anxiety spiked, stop him scratching himself, and get help if needed. Isn't that a lot for her to do just for me? Izuku asked. Doyle smiled at him reassuringly. You aren't the first person to be concerned. Trust me when I say these dogs love what they do. They love working and helping. As long as you give your love and food and exercise, she will follow you to the ends of the earth without hesitation. After that, Inko and Doyle scheduled regular classes so Izuku and Clover could get used to working together. Alrighty, y'all. I feel like that is a good place to leave this video off. If you liked it, please like, subscribe, and comment if you haven't already. And if you have any suggestions or questions or just anything you want to talk about, I read all my comments and try to respond, so I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Thank you. And don't forget to show Sunset Cougar your love. I'm going to be leaving the link to the description for the fanfic. And yeah, have a great day, y'all.